All right, guys, I'm Nicolette, and today Brian and I are here with Sal Salman. He is the CTO at Synaptic Aviation, and he's here to talk to us today about artificial intelligence, machine learning, the aviation industry, the future. We are going to have a very futuristic, hopefully, conversation today. So thank you so much for joining us, Sal. We do appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
So why don't you kick us off by telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, and the company?
Sure. My name is Sal. I've been in IT for well over 20 years. I graduated from University of Miami with a Bachelor's of Business in Information Systems. I decided to continue my studies at and I did an MBA focusing in information systems and leadership. And I never got bored, so I decided to continue and do a Master's of Science in Computer Science. So I have a dual master's and a bachelor's, all from University of Miami. And I've been extremely passionate about IT, about computer vision, AI, and machine learning. I recently got into AI and CV and machine learning about 7 years ago. This was back when the hardware was yet to start to compete with the software in the AI world. To be specific, this was like when the NVIDIA 9 series GPUs were out. That's a little bit about me and my history.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about what Synaptic Aviation is doing over there and what you're up against in the company?
Yeah, I think it'll be good to start off with how do we come out with this AI computer vision product, right? I have 5 children, and my kids all go to a school in Coral Gables, Florida, and safety was like the biggest concern of mine for my children, right? As with anybody else's children should be. I wanted to use my IT background and computer vision, ML, and AI background to see if there's a way to keep children safe. I developed this amazing platform that could be used to identify objects through computer vision and the security cameras and to determine whether there's a threat or not. One of my first AI models was really a weapon detection system where we trained the AI on multiple different potential weapons that would be used in an active shooter situation. So that's where my passion was, obviously my kids and keeping them safe, keeping all of our kids safe, not just my own kids. And that served as a springboard to many other computer vision and AI applications for other use cases. So fast forward, we step into the aviation use case. What really helped me on the aviation side was I worked for American Airlines for 3 years developing enterprise level systems for them. This was like 15 years ago. So it gave me a really good foundation of what the aviation industry is about and what their needs are. The aviation industry gravitates for information. Whether it's information when the airplane's up in the air, when it's being landed, when it's on the runway, when it's taxiing, information is vital for them. It helps them strategize for the future, and it helps them reduce costs because that's one of their biggest main concerns is cost cutting, cost savings, especially nowadays where the price of oil is just through the roof. So we fast forward, and I had developed an application, a software application for American Airlines back in the day that focused on some areas within their turnaround. But it wasn't complete because there's a lot of information missing at the actual gate where the camera's positioned. The only way that you can gather information as the aircraft is docking and parked and the suitcases are coming off and the GPU is being connected and the PCA is being connected is having a person on a clipboard timestamp and write down the stamp of all of these activities. So I kind of knew that because I was in the aviation industry, and this was an excellent case, business use case for AI. So my thought process was, let's put a camera facing the gate. We could, if I could identify an an AR and AK, I could definitely identify an aircraft, GPU connection, suitcase, belt loader, jet bridge, you name it. And we put all of these objects into this AI model, and we're documenting all the data that's being generated by the AI. So we're taking unstructured data, which is your video and your images, and you're turning it into usable structured data. And we had a really good partnership with Spirit Airlines. We have a close relationship with them through myself and through another business partner of mine. And fortunately, their VP of Airport Services is a person who loves innovation, and he was fully on board. He was like, "Let's test this system out. Let's put it to test, and let's see where it could help us strategize for the future, and in the meantime, also help us with some cost savings initiatives." The biggest cost saving initiative and tangible cost savings seen by the product is what's called aircraft holdout. What that means is a lot of times an aircraft lands, makes its way to the gate, and the marshal or wing walkers are not ready to receive the gate and help the pilot guide him to park the aircraft. So what happens is the aircraft sits in front of the gate and is waiting for somebody to come and call the aircraft in. Where we come in is we're able to identify that there's an aircraft there. One of our objects is person. We are able to identify that there is no person there. We send an alert to the managers, the ramp managers. They radio to the ground crew that you have an aircraft waiting. We actually even go as far as for Spirit Airlines, as far as putting a TV monitor within their operations office, and it audios to them as well. So these are people that are multifunctional, cross-functional, and they're doing other stuff at the same time. And the best way to alert them is through an audio alert that they could quickly look on the monitor. Yes, there is a holdout. Let's radio to the ground crew and get someone there. So that is, sorry.
Sorry, you would think, because I mean, like if you think about the airline industry, right? They were some of the first to embrace like AI with some of the autopilots, like planes flying themselves, like on a commercial level, right? You would think, so that you could see where this would fit in, right? But also too, you would think they would use some AI to let the planes park themselves.
That's what I was thinking. Right? I thought you were going to say that. I was like,
exactly,
okay, the planes
right? You got, they started using autopilot probably before anyone, right? Besides like, space programs, and let's just let that plane park itself at this point.
Are we getting there, Sal? Are we getting there?
Yeah, right.
We are getting there. There is some kind of automation that's currently out there, and we're kind of working on some of those things as well. Maybe not engaging and taking over the autopilot for the aircraft, but auto docking the jet bridge. So the jet bridge needs to extend as well. So there's some kind of robotics that we're looking into, and we're working on how we can automate the function of certain movements after the aircraft being docked.
And you mentioned too, like the airline industry loves data. I mean, they track everything. They know where every plane is, where it's going, how fast it's moving. I mean, they're probably out of any industry, they're tracking so much data on vehicles, probably out of any other industry all the time.
Absolutely. And this is part of the task within the aviation industry that's so costly, and that's the least amount of data available, which is where we come in. We can help support them in providing that data so they could better control the largest costs, which is a turnaround that the airline is accepting.
Now, having all that other data, what does it help the airline save, right? Does it save like fuel costs? Does it save like, what are some of the things, with using some of your technology that they're able to do?
Great question. Great question. Right off the bat is going to be fuel cost. So there is something called double engine taxi, where sometimes an aircraft will hit the runway, land on the runway and taxi in with two engines on. We can make them aware that they're using two engines, and they're supposed to only use one engine. And then there's an aircraft holdout we're talking about earlier. So fuel costs right off the bat is a huge savings for them. Also, in terms of making sure that your customers are satisfied with your service. So that's an intangible cost, but that cost is extremely high for the airline, right? The last thing that anybody wants on a 2-hour or 3-hour flight is to land and not be docked right away. And so the customer satisfaction is a huge intangible cost for them that they're seeing with our system help them a lot. So we have jet fuel costs, we have customer satisfaction, types of costs associated with that. And then just the expectation of information. So what we're also working on is, since we can identify suitcases, we are able to inform the passengers at the bag belt when the suitcase comes on. So there's an expectation of how long they should be waiting to receive their bag. So that is a huge value add, not just for the airline, for their passengers, but for the airport as well. It gives the airport the opportunity to increase their revenue, because if you know that there's 20 minutes left to receive your luggage, you may go to Starbucks, grab a cup of coffee, or out in Miami and empanada,
Yeah.
So that also helps them on the revenue side, not just on the cost saving side.
Are there any other challenges that you guys are solving? I mean, when you talk about I'm thinking about something as simple as a guy standing there with a clipboard writing down timestamps. I mean, that's something pretty simple that you were able to kind of work with. Are there any other things like that?
Yeah, so if we can evolve and think about safety, kind of utilizing my background of where we created a springboard onto aviation. Aircraft damage doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen, right? Mm-hmm. So we are able to track if anybody is driving close to the jet engine. If the jet bridge is parked not in the right parking spot and the aircraft is coming in. So we're able to alert the pilot saying, wait, don't come in yet because the jet bridge is not properly stowed away. Mm-hmm. So in terms of safety, there's a lot of value there to making sure that we could mitigate any kind of aircraft damage. In terms of security, there shouldn't be any person during a certain number of hours when the airport is not in operation. So we also help the airline with that to make sure that nobody is around the aircraft or trying to get into the aircraft during the off hours. So not only operational efficiencies, not only cost savings, but we also help with safety and security.
So we did hear that you just signed with Unifi, correct? And they are the largest ground handling and aviation services company in North America. I want to make sure I got that right. So in what ways are you going to be working with them?
Yeah. So Unifi is one of the largest ground handlers in America, and they primarily take care of anything on the ground for the airline. So part of their biggest concern is to make sure that they are maintaining certain KPIs for the airline. So they would like to know if they're not meeting those KPIs because they want to get that contract renewal. They want to become more efficient, and they want to become the leader in the ground handling space that can utilize AI to kind of help them navigate and structure where they're going to be in the future. So if it normally takes 2 minutes to connect the GPU. And why is that super important? Because then you could tell the pilot to turn off the APU, which is another cost savings for the airline. And they're doing it in maybe 4 minutes. Well, let's find a way to get it under 2 minutes. If it takes 5 minutes to take the first bag off, or if it takes 45 minutes to completely unload the aircraft of the luggage, we could now set a timeline saying, hey, we have some predictive analysis saying you can save time here and save minutes here to kind of condense that from 45 to 30 minutes. So one of their biggest achievements in utilizing our product is to gain to increase operational performance. The safety aspect is also relevant to, you have to put certain number of cones around the engine and around the aircraft to make sure that, if somebody's driving around there, the cone kind of steers them away. So they're also looking forward to gain the benefits of the safety features as well.
So, and you guys are visually monitoring this, right? So, part of this, no data, no. Okay.
There is no person visually monitoring it to decipher the data that's coming out of it. The AI is doing
but you're visually monitoring with the AI
from time to time.
from time to time.
Yeah, we'll just check in and see, the progress. There's something called fine tuning in AI that maybe if it detects something too late, we'll just send it for fine tuning and more training. But we are completely hands off in terms of the detections and the data produced. It's pretty much by itself. Yeah.
So it's coming in and the AI is predicting it, and it's seeing comparisons between this airport and that airport where maybe it's more efficient here, and why is that? So it gives them the ability to question.
Absolutely. Is it the crew there? Is it the policies of the airport? Is it the different airline that they have different requirements? Absolutely. So it will vary from airport to airport. And when we see the largest value for us is we'll be able to inform them and the airline and even the airports that, these ground handlers are great. This is what we need to work on in these ground handlers. And this airline turns faster than the other airline. Let's try to learn from them, and let's try to turn as fast, right? So, nowadays in the aviation industry, I mean, we all want to work together, and we all want to make sure that we stay as efficient as possible. Our common goal in the aviation industry is to reduce CO2 emissions, right? So we have a product that can help the airline and the world reduce CO2 emissions. Which is the AI, to make sure that the APU gets turned off quick enough, to make sure that they're not holding out and still running the engines when they're not supposed to. So there's a lot of global initiatives that we can help steer utilizing our product. And this is a common way for all of us to work together within the aviation industry.
Because I would think, I'm just gonna go back to the visual, right? Like, so if they had you guys come in and set up some visual, right, and you were able to monitor that, like, here's the airport that's doing really good. This is the most efficient, whatever, gate in the world, right? You could actually go and say, what are they doing? Like, visually, what are they doing? Not just like, here's the data, and this is the speed it's going at, or whatever the case is, right? You could say, okay, the reason why this team is, the number one team in the world is because, X, Y, and Z. So I would think that, like, when people were using your service, like, I would think, like, wow, let me find that really efficient one, and let me go put some visual piece in there so I could actually see what's happening and let the AI look at how that team is functioning. I'm just saying.
Exactly. You got it. It's another way of saying helping retraining some of those gates that are underperforming, right? Exactly. So on our platform, we store all of the data along with the visual. Sorry. So we do have videos to prove out that the data is what it is, and also to help improve the underperforming gates. Absolutely. Great point.
Sorry, Nicolette, I interrupted your questions.
No, that's okay. That's all right. I was actually going to ask a little bit of a forward-facing question, kind of looking into the future and thinking about when we think about the future of aviation, right? Where do you see artificial intelligence really taking us?
Yep. So we were working on a study with one of the top aviation schools in the U.S. In relation to UAMs, urban aerial mobility, and we were exploring ways of how AI can help with that. So put aside the commercial airlines and the passenger airlines and the cargo airlines, we are going to move into this direction of having aerial taxis take us from point A to point B. Maybe 5 to 10 years from now. 5 to 10 years from now. But the challenging piece is it's going to be super difficult to find that many pilots. And this is where we go back to our initial conversations where you were referring to maybe having the autopilot park the aircraft. And this is where AI can help tremendously, because we will move into that direction, and there may not be enough pilots out there for the aerial taxis, but we will be able to utilize either through some kind of virtual reality link that the pilot might be offsite, but be able to control the aerial taxi, and through the use of AI to determine how far off the ground they are, if there's any objects in the way. In terms of aerial, there's certain rules and restrictions as to how high you have to be to use these aerial taxis, and the AI can monitor and make sure that you're within that height range. So there's tremendous opportunity in the future for that.
Do you see it also being used for space exploration eventually? The same sort of thing, like all the AI going, sending people to Mars or whatever, even these orbital flights.
Yeah, I mean, an immediate use case that I've thought about for space is, so the great thing about AI is you can train it to look for whatever you want to find, right? So, but what about if there's objects that's unidentified? So that's where I think in space it's gonna bring true value, and it's gonna help us identify stuff that we are not identifying.
Right.
And that way we can grab that data and start learning from it, and start classifying as what is this in space, right? So that's where I think one of the biggest values in like space, SpaceX, and they're probably working on that there.
Right. Well, I mean, I would think too, when you get into that scenario, you're more talking about like edge computing over, cloud computing, because you're not going to be sending data all the way back to somewhere else to, you're going to have it, with you, in order to start analyzing some of that stuff and learning.
Exactly. It could be on an IoT device or an edge type of device. NVIDIA's coming out with amazing edge AI devices. But yeah, you would have your classification model there, or your object detection model there, and it's set to identify 120 objects. And it'll just be great to for the AI to also put in a big bucket what it cannot identify.
Yeah.
So that way we can start learning from it.
Yeah, especially in space with all those little objects floating around. I mean, it's
absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Well, before we let you go, you often give lectures about automating processes. And so aside from aviation, what would you love to see automated? Just what challenges are out there right now that you would love to start, that may be within reach very soon?
That's a good question.
You can be as fun as you'd like.
But I'd love to automate my own job, right? So just kind of applying it to AI, right? So within AI, there's what's called supervised learning and unsupervised learning, right? The automation of the supervised learning aspect of it is going to be key, because that is a very tedious job to do. And we're still not in this unsupervised learning world yet, although some people think we are. And we're still not in AGI, which is artificial general intelligence yet. So just to help expedite and automate the way that the image annotations function as part of the whole AI training process, that would be a huge value add, a large amount of time savings. There's companies out there that claim that they do something like that, but I don't see a real automated method yet for that, to be honest with you. And usually what companies claim, they may have a bunch of people in the background doing the work. So that part, I think if we can automate that part, it can speed up a lot of the AI training, which is going to be essential to the inference model that we're actually creating. Sorry for not being fun.
No, that's okay.
No,
you're practical.
No, I mean, I totally get it.
Yeah.
So, Brian, do you have any other questions for us?
No, I think I'm good. So, where can we learn more about what you're doing?
Absolutely. You could learn more at www.synapticaviation.com. That is our Synaptic Aviation company website. It has all the information needed and what we're providing to ground handlers, cargo, and passenger airlines.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us today, Sal. We do appreciate your time.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you, guys.